What's up, everyone? I'm Kyle from Keystone Production Network, and welcome into another episode of Keystone Academy. So today we're going to be talking all about keyframes. We're going to be talking about what they are, what the purpose of them is, and how they're used. So in both Premiere and After Effects, keyframes look a little something like this. Now, today we're going to be focusing mostly on Premiere, but most of what I say will carry over into After Effects. So what is a keyframe? A keyframe marks a defining shot or frame that determines the start or end point of a transition within an effect. So what we're going to do here is I actually have the Keystone logo imported into my project. I'm going to create a new sequence by clicking on the timeline and pressing Control N or Command N on Mac. And I'm just going to accept these default settings here. I'll call this keyframe demo and I'll press OK. So now we've got a sequence appearing down here in our timeline, and I'm just going to click and drag our logo here onto video layer 1. So I can zoom in using this bar down here. Not that it really makes a difference, but what we're going to do is then click on our little graphic down here in the timeline and go up and click on Effect Controls. That is going to automatically come with motion, opacity, and it'll also come with time remapping. This is on every single clip, no matter if it's a graphic, a text, or a video clip. So all of these elements within these effects are things that we're going to be able to actually keyframe. So let's use scale as our example. Obviously, this image is taking up the entirety of the frame right now, and we're not going to want that. So what I can do is go over here, scroll to the left as I click and hold, and I can resize this logo. So right now we're down to 50% scale, and I think that's a pretty good size filling up that frame. Now let's say I want this graphic to slowly scale up, to slowly get bigger. So what I can do is to create a keyframe, I click on this stopwatch icon, the little toggle animation button right here. So when I click on this, what you'll see is it actually creates a keyframe for me. Now, if I scroll down in the timeline, which I could do either up here in the Effect Controls window or down below in my timeline. So now I want to mark where I will be at this point in time on my timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale this up a little bit. I'm actually just going to click and type, let's say 55%. So as you can see, our graphic scaled up a little bit. And what we've essentially done is we've said at this point in time, we want our graphic to be at 55% scale. At this point in time, we want our graphic to be at 50% scale. And what it'll do, as you can see when I scrub through here, is it just fills in the rest. So it's actually slowly scaling up that graphic. And as you can see, it's slowly scaled up over that period of time. So in order to create additional keyframes, you can do what I did before, which was move to a different point in the timeline and then make an adjustment from there. But if you want to, let's say, copy a keyframe, let's say I want to actually scale this back down, I'm actually going to go down here to the timeline and extend this a little bit so we have a little more time to work with. And as you can see, if I go back to my effect controls, as you can see, it extended it here. So let's say I want to, instead of just scaling it up, I want it to scale up, then kind of sit at that size for a second, then scale back down. What I'll do is I'll go to the point where I want it to start scaling back down, and I can either copy this keyframe by going Control or Command C on Mac, and then Control V to paste it. So what I've done is I've just copied this keyframe and pasted it right here. Another way of doing this, if this is not in the middle of a transition, so if we're not right here where it's already moving, what I can do is I can press this little button right here, which will add or remove a keyframe on our current playhead. So if I press this, that will add another keyframe for 55% scale. And then I can go further down the timeline again, and I can, let's say, go back to, I guess, 50%. So I'll type that in, I'll press enter, and it's back down to 50% scale. So as you can see, it gets bigger, it stops, and then it goes back down to 50%. To navigate between keyframes, what you can do is, instead of just clicking and dragging and trying to find the specific frame that you want to be at, you can just go to these two little arrows right here. So this will go to the previous keyframe, and this will go to the next keyframe. And this little blue indicator in the middle indicates that you are on a currently created keyframe. So if I'm going to move off this, now I can create one. If I go back to it and I press this, it'll actually delete that keyframe. So I'll press Ctrl Z to undo that. Also keep in mind that you can move these keyframes. So let's say I want this gap where it's not moving to be a little bit longer. So what I can do is I can highlight and select both of these keyframes, and I can click and drag them and move them further down the timeline. So now this space where it's not moving is actually a lot longer. And you could do the same thing here for any of these elements or any elements within these effects, and also any effects that you add into it, in addition to what it typically comes with. So if you're ever doing any sort of complex motion graphics or animation, I always recommend switching over and using After Effects, which is essentially built on the idea of keyframes. Now, I do want to go over one other thing about keyframes before we wrap up here, and that is easing. Easing is a way to smooth out your transitions, basically making the velocity of a movement change from linear to curved. So if I were to right click on a keyframe, let's just choose this one right here, you'll see that at the bottom here I have some ease in and ease out options, as well as some other options up here. Ease in does as it sounds, it eases into a keyframe, and ease out does the opposite. It'll ease out of that keyframe. So let's go ahead and look at what we have here and think about what we might want to use. So in this keyframe is where our movement starts. So we're going out of this keyframe and into this one. Now there's no movement between here, so we don't really want any easing going on within this little box. But what we might want is, if we want to ease out of this keyframe and into this one, we can do the same here. We can ease out of this one and into this one. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to click ease out. I'm going to do the same here, but click ease in. Same thing. Oops. Just move that a little bit. We'll move that back. Right click here, ease out. Right click here, ease in. So as you see there, it kind of smooths out that motion a little bit. It doesn't just go from no motion to a complete stop and vice versa. It actually does a little bit of a transition where it slows into it. And I think that's really important for making your animations or whatever you're doing to modify your effects look as smooth as possible. So this is just the very basics of keyframes, and if you'd like me to go in more depth on certain things that they can be used for, make sure you drop a comment in the comment section below. And thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you can get notified when we post more tutorial videos.